an overview of Moorepay for those of you who aren't familiar with the organisation. Then I'll introduce our host for today, Phil Barker, and after the main presentation, we'll come to the Q&A period. So in terms of Moorepay, I'm conscious that not everyone on the webinar is a customer of ours, so I'll run through some brief information on the slide. We're a payroll and HR solutions business. We were established over 50 years ago and have 10,000 customers across a range of industries. On a monthly basis, we handle 12,500 payroll, HR and health and safety queries, and essentially we're the market leader in HR and payroll services to small businesses. The wheel summarises the products and services we offer, and if you'd like to find out more about us, go to moorepay.co.uk, where there's lots of information on our services and solutions. I'll now hand over to Phil, who will take you through today's topic, managing the risk of workplace stress. Thank you, Phil.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Just sorry about the noise there, just moving the laptop around so I can take control. Yeah, so I've been at Moorepay now for coming up to 12 years, now manage the health and safety consultants. Started out with the business as a health and safety consultant and then worked my way through. Prior to working for this business, I worked for one of the top 5 food retail businesses, looking after health and safety across 900 plus stores. So on today's presentation, what we're going to do is we're going to look at what is workplace stress and why as a business it makes good sense to tackle it. And as you'll see, there is a good business case for reducing stress in the workplace. We'll also look at what the law requires, so what the Health and Safety at Work Act and the relevant regulations require you to do. What the HSE or the Health and Safety Executive's current standpoint is on stress, and how they have created some management standards to help with risk assessments on this topic, and some key considerations when implementing and managing stress. And then we'll look at the benefits of taking action to reduce that workplace stress. So just moving on to that first topic, why do we need to tackle workplace stress? Well, there's a lot of figures on there which show that it's a biggish problem. There are 15.4 million working days lost due to work-related stress reported for the last financial year. Sorry, previous financial year. The figures for this year will be out soon. But 15.4 million days, that is a significant number. We've got just short of 240,000, sorry, yeah, 240, just short of 250,000. That'll be a good figure to go with, a nice easy word to say. Workers suffering from work-related stress as new reports within that same financial year. So it's a big problem. If you looked at graphs and stats, it's on the increase. But also on the back of that, when we look at some other surveys, we can see there that there's a lot of presenteeism. So if you look at the bottom half of the slide, 86% of respondents to the health and wellbeing survey, sorry, last year, reported that people were at work while suffering from ill health. It's not necessarily just stress, but it was a mental health across the whole part. So there's anxiety, depression, stress, other mental health issues. So that's 86% of people that respond to the survey have witnessed colleagues at work suffering from mental health, not taking time off sick. So not only have we got the 15.4 million days lost, we've got a large percentage of people at work suffering from stress, other mental health issues that are affecting productivity within the business. And as I said earlier, this is where the business case really comes in for tackling and managing stress. Just think of how much productivity suffers, how much productivity is reduced by people not only being off sick because they've got stress, but also struggling through at work, probably working 50 to 60% of capacity, rather than actually dealing with the issues and been working at 100% capacity. So there's a real business case there. So it's slightly more concerning from a health and safety point of view that in that same survey, the respondents, only 25% reported that their employers appeared to be doing anything to reduce that problem. So businesses have got a problem with stress, absenteeism, presenteeism, but only a quarter appear to be doing anything about solving that. And that's what we're really going to look at over the next few slides, how you can as a business start to reduce that problem that you've got with workplace stress and to increase your productivity. So what does the law say? The Health and Safety at Work Act underlines all health and safety legislation within the UK, and the key word in that description is health. So we have to look after the health of people, not just safety at work. So we're not just worrying about broken bones, cut fingers. We do need to consider the health. Now, health covers a multitude of things from asthma through to stress, but the management regulations, Regulation 3 of the Management of Health and Safety at Work regs, requires every employer to make a suitable and sufficient risk assessment of the risks to health and safety. Again, key word in there is health. So when we're talking about stress, these regulations require that we undertake a risk assessment to control, reduce and manage stress within the workplace. So what is the current HSE position? About 2 years ago, maybe a bit longer now, the Health and Safety Executive recognised that they'd not really been on top of the game on stress management and stress enforcement, and really helping employers to address the problem. So they already had some management standards and some guidance in place that was dated. So about 2 years ago, as I said, they updated and refreshed all of these tools. Some of them we'll talk about later in the presentation. The HSE, they're not really looking at prosecuting currently on employers that are not handling the issue. They're more encouraging, helping, assisting employers to reduce the problem and to improve productivity for individual businesses and the UK economy as a whole. So what are the HSE management standards? You'll probably have seen some of these headings and some of this content on a previous HR webinar, if you've been on some of our previous webinars on stress. But the key areas that cause stress in the workplace are the demands of the job, control or rather lack of control. Employees, if they don't feel they're in control, it can cause stress. Whether they're being supported by colleagues or not, relationships within the workplace, are they friendly, community, or do we have toxic relationships where people are, want of a better description, of backstabbing? What is their role in the business? And one that really always causes stress is change. How change within a business is managed, how often does it happen? And how well is that managed? Is it communicated properly? And change can involve a lot of the others because people tend to feel that they're losing control. They might not be getting the proper support through the change. So change can be a big factor in workplace stress. So how do the HSE management standards look at this? So we'll just go through the definitions within the HSE for those topic areas that we mentioned earlier. So demand, pretty obvious really. It's the workload, it's work patterns, can be the working environment. So what demands is the work and how it's undertaken, placing on the individual employee. Control, how much say does that person have in the way they do their work? Obviously somebody on a production line, the work rate is controlled by how fast the conveyor belt or the machinery is working. Somebody in an office job may have more control over what they do and when they do it. Support, are we looking at, we're looking here at how people are encouraged, sponsored, what resources are provided in the organisation, how do line managers manage their people, are they supportive, and do colleagues support and assist their workforce. Relationships, a bit of a crossover with support. Are we promoting a positive working environment? Do we avoid conflict? And if there is any unacceptable behaviour, is it dealt with? Role, whether your employees understand what that role is, where do they fit into the business, how is that important? Do they know what they're doing? Do they know how their role fits in? And do they potentially have conflicting roles, which automatically brings in conflict and can break down relationships? And again, we mentioned earlier change. Change can be large or small. Sometimes just moving somebody's desk from one side of the office to another side of the office can actually cause stress for various reasons. It might be underlying mental health issues like autism, but just something as simple as moving somebody's desk can cause stress, anxiety, etc. So under each of these, the HSE have set out what good looks like. So their standards are, they go into a lot more detail on this, but these are just the headline bullet points. So on its demands, employees should be able to indicate that they're able to cope with their job. There should be systems in place locally that allow them to report, escalate issues. Similarly with controls, employees should be able to turn around to managers and say, yes, they feel like they're controlling their workload. If they've got problems, they should be able to talk to managers and to escalate this. And as I'm going through, you'll probably pick up a theme here that managers play a key role in managing stress, and we'll talk about that later. Again, with support, does the employee feel that they've had the correct training, the correct information? Do they know how to do their job? Does the managers talk to them? Do they get regular feedback? Relationships, again, similarly, the employees indicate they're not subjected to bullying, they're not subjected to discrimination, and that where these issues are raised, there are systems in place for them to be dealt with. Role, again, as I mentioned earlier, key one, employees need to understand how important their job is, how that fits into the workflow, what their inputs are, what their outputs are, where does that work go to, how does that affect the final product or the final service being delivered. Change, again, we need the change. You can do we could do a whole day on change management and how to manage and mitigate stress through change management. But yeah, so just on change, do employees understand why change is happening? Do they understand the benefits that are going to come out of the change? Is it clearly communicated often that there's going to be some short-term pain for a long-term gain, but employees understand that, and that they're talked through the whole process and supported throughout that. So if you're wanting to look at how to manage stress, I will say stress is not a quick fix. Doing a stress risk assessment, it's not get a piece of paper out, get a risk assessment form out, jot some notes down, 5 minutes later, we've got a stress risk assessment in place. It is quite a big job, and when we look at some of the tools later the HSE have developed for larger businesses, it can be a 5-year project. So it's not something that you can just jump into and turn around and say, right, that's it, we've done it. We need to start small and grow the approach and grow the management techniques. We don't want to just avoid tackling stress just because we know there's some change in the horizon. If you remember the previous slide, change can actually cause stress. So it's a good idea to just deal with stress anyway. Obviously get the timing right. Is it the right time within the business? And obviously that sort of may contradict the change bullet point above it, but I'm talking, is it the right time structurally, organizationally? Are the right people in the business to be able to push this through? There's a lot of planning needed when we're looking at tackling stress. We need to make sure we've got stakeholder groups in place, the right people doing the right jobs, we've communicated properly. But don't go reinventing the wheel. There are a lot of tools out there, and we'll discuss those in a bit, that help you. But the key thing when you're preparing the business to look at stress is to make sure we've got senior management commitment. And that's not just somebody's photograph and a name saying, yes, we support this project. It needs to be real. It needs to be real commitment. Senior managers need to walk and talk stress reduction. At the end of the day, it's good for business. It's It's reducing absenteeism, increasing productivity. So there should be no reason why senior business managers should not want to buy in to reducing stress. It's also important to secure employee commitment and buy-in. We're going to manage stress a lot by filling out questionnaires. So employees need to understand that those questionnaires need to be filled in properly, honestly, and not sarcastically. If employees obviously don't believe that they've got senior management buy-in, then they're not going to buy into it themselves, but we need to secure that buy-in. We obviously then also need to set up steering groups, project groups, make sure we've got the right people on there, include HR teams, line managers, employee representatives, and come up with a clear plan out of that steering group. Secure resources. This is mainly staff time in resources. It's allowing the staff to have the time to fill in the questionnaires, having the steering group have the time to come away from day job and focus once a month, once a quarter on looking at stress. Probably the most key one is having a clear communication strategy, making sure that your employees know that you're looking at stress, clearly define the timeframes, and make sure again that the staff know what these timeframes are. It all comes into helping with securing employee commitments. Staff need to know that if they're filling an application for, questionnaire in April, that they may not see results until June, July. Otherwise, they'll be filling the questionnaire in April and then wondering why nothing's been done in May. So there needs to be some clear communication on the timeframes to make people aware of where that sits in within the whole strategy. Once you've got all the results, again, communicate what the key findings are and communicate what actions the business is going to take to start to reduce stress. Some of these will be quick wins, some of them will be longer 3, 4, 5-year projects. If we're talking about training, redesigning workflows, these are not things that we can quickly put in, but we just need to make sure that we're telling the employees we've identified these as an issue and these are the steps that we're doing moving forward to improve the situation for you. A risk assessment for stress is very similar to any other health and safety risk assessments. We just need to identify what the risk factors are, and these were the demand control issues that we talked about earlier. Decide who might be harmed so that we've got clear indication. Usually it's going to be employees, but you might be able to identify certain groups of employees within a business. Is it management? Is it a certain team? Once we've done that, then we can evaluate the risks. Why are people at risk? Why are they getting stressed? What can we do to reduce that? And make sure all this is recorded. And then key thing to any kind of risk assessment is to monitor and review. So obviously with stress, some of the indicators that we would be using are absenteeism records, productivity records. We'd have a benchmark at the start of the project, and we'd monitor that at 6 monthly, 12 monthly intervals to see whether we're improving the situation moving forward. So looking at organisational size, risk assessment, particularly when it comes to stress, is proportional. There are sort of 3 key tools that the HSE have. 2 of them are on this slide and 1 we'll look at on the next. But for small organisations, the tool that's on the left-hand side of the screen is basically a management review of their own behaviours, and it's probably good enough for a small or very small business, where a manager or a business owner can look at how they manage people. Are their management styles likely to encourage stress, or are they managing in a way that reduces the likelihood of stress happening in their workplace? So it allows managers, business owners to look at their own behaviours and see what they might need to address to reduce stress. That can also be used for department managers in a larger organisation, but would probably want to be done in association with one of these other tools that we're talking about next. The HSE have a really good questionnaire and Excel based tool, which will work for medium, large, sort of like small, medium businesses that on the board of their sort of 200-ish employees. On this, you send a questionnaire out to staff, they fill it in, that comes back in anonymously, and the results are transferred onto an Excel spreadsheet. The Excel spreadsheet's got some calculations in the background, which helps produce an action plan, identifying where your issues are, and then you can use the guidance that runs alongside of that to target your interventions to reduce stress within the workplace. Now, if you're a really large employer and you're looking to cover thousands of staff across multiple sites, there's an even easier way of doing that now, but it's not cheap. The Health and Safety Executive, along with the Health and Safety Laboratories, who are based in Buxton, have created an online tool which does a very similar job to the questionnaire and Excel spreadsheet we talked about earlier. It just does a lot of that work online so that you're not having to actually go in and transfer the findings onto the spreadsheet. All that work's done automatically for you. The questions in here can be tailored to suit the business. You can choose sections to delete, or you can edit them. And the output is a nice PDF report with the key indicators, with bar charts, pie charts, and everything else that board directors love when you're doing a board presentation, telling you where the problems are and suggesting key actions. But again, these can take a long time, and there are recommendations that for larger businesses, this is a 5-year project. And when you sign up to this, you sign up really for a 5-year commitment. So it's a big commitment, and this is why I really suggest that this is only for larger employers, and the previous 2 work better for SMEs. So how can we help? And how can Moorepay help to help a business manage and improve their performance on stress? Well, we have some toolkits available on our HR hub, which any of our health and safety clients can download. It's based around the first model that we showed you on how to manage stress. So it's the questionnaire for managers, but also gives some additional guidance and talks you through how to implement and start to look at stress across the business. If you want to go for one of the more complex solutions, so the staff questionnaires or the online tool, then we can come along and do some consultancy support there, talk through how that's going to be set up, help interpret the surveys and create the action plans. Similarly with the online tool, helping assist you make sure those questions are right and you're gathering the right information that's right for your business. So that's realistically how we can support businesses managing stress. And remember, the health and safety approach to stress is let's prevent it from happening, rather than dealing with the issues once they've arisen. So the benefits of managing stress we talked about throughout the slide: reducing staff turnover, because if people are in a happy environment, they're likely to stay there, they're likely to carry on working. Reduces sickness and absence. And again, if we talk about presenteeism, with the large numbers of people at work who are potentially sick and could potentially be off sick, we've got a performance issue there. So it's a double-edged sword, really. It reduces sickness, it improves performance, because you've got more people at work, and the people at work are actually working to full productivity. And hopefully, if we're doing this properly, because we're avoiding conflict, we're avoiding, we're improving relationships, then we've reduced the complaints, internal and grievances. So you're spending less time dealing with those, and again, further increase on productivity. So hopefully that's given you a good insight into stress and how to manage it and reduce it from a health and safety perspective. If you want some more information, then we're going to go through some numbers and some contact details in a bit. But if anybody's got any questions, I'll hand over to Hannah, because she's got control of that part of the software.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Phil. If you can all continue to drop your questions into the question panel, and I will run through them in order. So we've already received a few questions. The first question is from Alison. She's asked, do you think mental health first aiders will help with reducing workplace stress?
Yeah, mental health first aid that's a really good question. For those who don't really know on the call, I'll just run through what that is. It's a reasonably new idea, probably 5 years, maybe a bit longer, since the idea really came into being and reformalized into a course qualification, if you want to call it that. And you'll find that a lot of the first aid providers like St John's are also running mental health first aid courses now. So the idea of mental health first aider is somebody who staff can talk to if they're feeling stressed, if they've got problems outside of work, inside of work, and it really is a way of dealing with problems that have already existed and happened. So yes, it will reduce workplace stress or rather it'll reduce the impact of stress, because you've got somebody in there who can deal with the stress and reduce it when it occurs. ideally we want to stop that stress happening in the first place. So yes, mental health first aiders, EAP programs, and the risk assessment sort of is a parallel attack on stress. One is about mitigating the effects, so that's your mental health first aiders and your employee assistance programs. But the health and safety approach is let's prevent it in the first place. Let's make sure that we've got controls in place so that people don't need to use mental health first aiders.
Brilliant, thanks, Phil. Next question is from Ben, who has asked, could the HSE prosecute my business for failing to manage workplace stress?
Well, as we touched on the slides earlier, the management regulations require risk assessments to be put in place for stress. I would suggest that if an employer has followed some of these standard processes, they are following the HSE best practice on managing stress, in which case the HSE will see that the business is trying to address the problem. There is a theoretical potential for prosecution. At the moment, the HSE approach is to encourage, cajole, support businesses in managing the situation rather than going down the enforcement route. So there is a theoretical risk of a prosecution. I believe at the moment that is low, but I would also encourage people to actually start to deal with it, because at some point the HSE are going to turn around and say, we've tried to help you, we've tried to support you, we've done enough. Now we're going to come in with the stick. So at the moment, they're dangling the carrot out and helping people. At some point, they're going to follow that up with the stick.
Great. Now, we've also received a question from Kerry. Kerry has asked, she said, I have 180 staff at my organisation. What's the best way to create a wellbeing survey for them?
I would be tempted to start to use the second question with that number of staff, which would be you email the questionnaire out to the employees, they send that back, and you collate the figures manually. The online version is quite costly. You might want to look at that, but even the HSE tend to say it doesn't work for 200 employee businesses. You need to be a bit bigger than that. So you might want to just go down that questionnaire route, have those sent back. You could always drop the questions onto a Survey Monkey, which would make it easier to collate the figures.
Great, thank you, Phil. Ken's also asked, when looking at all of this, what number is considered as a large business from a HSE perspective? I
think I maybe just touched on that in the previous answer, but I think to be using the online tool, you really want 500 plus employees. It works best in the thousands. It needs quite a lot of data to be able to drive the figures and to give you the accurate results. And the HSE work on something like a 20, I'm doing this from memory now, but the HSE work on something like a 25% return rate. So if you sent it out to 100 employees, only 25 would fill it in. So you need quite a large employee base to be able to get the data back. So you're talking thousands to be using the online tool, and sort of like hundreds to be using the survey that you email out.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Phil. And we've got another question in from Emma. Emma has asked, if I have a member of staff off on sick leave, do they still need to be included in the questionnaire?
Yes, is a simple answer, and they're probably the right person to be included in it, depending on why they're off. It could really be that could really be some insightful information to help you manage the situation, identify where your issues are.
Thank you, Phil. Let me just have a quick look. I think we've received a few more questions. Paulina has asked, what would be the best way to start if the company is under 20 employees, so quite a small organisation?
Yeah, I think with that size organisation, if you download the toolkit that's on our HR hub, you've got all the tools in there that you need. It's very much a case of just a business owner and managers looking at their own behaviours and seeing if there's something that you're doing or you're expecting staff to do that's causing stress. Or could likely cause stress, and look at those. Small businesses by nature tend to have less of a stress issue than larger business, because if you think about it was demands, control, communication, role. In smaller businesses, the communication's a lot easier because everybody's working alongside each other as a rule. I'm making presumptions there. but everybody tends to be in the same office. The owners are around, the managers are talking to the staff more, and everybody's clear on their role because they can see everybody else and what they're doing. So it tends to be a less of an issue in smaller businesses, but which is why just looking at your own behaviours as a manager can often be enough to just reduce those stress levels and to make sure that you're doing everything you need to be doing.
Great, thank you. And thank you very much to everyone that asked a question. If you do think of any other questions, oh, bear with me 1 second. I think we might just have one more through. Let me just have a quick look. Right, okay. I don't think we've received any more questions through, but if you do have any more questions, then you can send me an email at the end of this session and I can forward them on to Phil to address. Let me just have a quick look.
I think if there are any more questions, we'll just pick those up and we'll get somebody to call back on those. We'll have a look at the questions at the end of the. So if you've still got any last minute questions, just pop them on the box now, and we'll get somebody to call you.
Great, thank you. And just to follow up, we will be sending a recording of the webinar to you along with a copy of the slides. And if you want to follow us on any of our social sites, we publish all of our new blogs and guides on there, so you'll see them flash up on your news feed. We've done a number of different pieces of content for Stress Awareness Month that you'll see. I hope you found the webinar useful. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Phil for hosting the webinar today and for answering your questions. We'll close the webinar now. I hope you have a lovely day, and we'll follow up with the slides and recording as soon as they do become available. Thank you everyone for joining. Goodbye.
Right.